Making dioramas, it's a very creative and rewarding hobby because you can go from a pile of shapeless trash to a very detailed creation. However, sometimes we just want it for a game, D&D, Warhammer or whatever you play. Something easy to make, inexpensive, but that still looks realistic. Well, if that's the case, you might be interested in watching this video because I'll show you how to make a diorama from scratch with just a 10 euros budget. Yes, I know it might not seem true right now, but I made this diorama spending less than 10 euros. So let me share with you what did I do, so maybe you can. You mean that after you already spent so much money on tools and materials in the past, for this specific project you only spent 10 euros? Wow, big deal. No, I mean 10 euros in total. You don't trust me? Well, lucky me, I recorded everything, so sit down and relax while I show you how I did it. Truth is, I came with this idea after a friend told me that one of the dioramas I made looked great, but that it was for sure too expensive, especially when you don't have already certain tools or materials. And that got me thinking, because that's really not the case. You can make this a really inexpensive hobby. So because I was going for a few days to see my parents, why not, instead of carrying a bunch of tools, I just grab my phone and record everything. And because there was recently a comment in one of my videos about making things easier for beginners, I'll try to show you how to use as many inexpensive materials as possible. But let's start already. Our first step then will be to go to a dollar store type of place and try to buy as many cheap materials as possible. What I truly like about these places is that you can find a lot of things very cheap. We don't need a lot of colors, so I'm just gonna grab white, black and a brown, because this will be enough for our diorama. As you can see, we have a lot of different type of popsicles, and every type is just 9 cents, so we're just gonna grab a bunch of them. I also grab some brushes, 90 cents, and some white glue for 1 euro. So as you can see, if we pick the cheapest, we can bring a lot of things to make our diorama. So we have foam board, but this is 3 euros and we don't want to spend that much money. So even if I don't like this foam, it's just 1 euro. So I think it's worth it that for our diorama we pick this one. Although, you know, I really hate this kind of foam. It's fine. These are our tools and materials for this project. As you can see, we have more plaster or paint than what we'll need for this diorama. I don't have a decent utility knife, or a hobby knife, or super glue, or a hot wire cutter. I don't have many of the tools I usually have, and with materials it's just the same, like this disastrous EPS foam. However, these limitations won't keep us from making something realistic. Our diorama has two main levels, the ground and the rocks in the back. So we're gonna start with our foundation. So let me introduce you to our first material.
Foam.
For this, there's nothing better than foam, because we want to have some height variation in the terrain, like trenches. Think of foam, EPS or XPS, doesn't matter, as your more consistent starting point. Of course, it can serve other purposes, but because it's both solid and light, it can be easily used for the foundations of any given structure. And because it can be easily cut, we can glue it and then cut wherever we see fit.
Paper.
Is foam the only filler we can use? Obviously not. Because we're doing this project on a budget, I couldn't afford any more foam for these hills, even if it's just 1 euro. But no problem, because anything can be your filler. So I grabbed some wrapping paper and that's it. It will be covered, it will hold, and no one will see the difference.
Modeling compound.
Welcome to the first element that you either buy or make yourself. If foam was the foundation, think of this compound as the filler. grab some paper, shred it, mix it in a 1:1 ratio with plaster, and boom, you have DIY modeling compound. You can buy it and it's not very expensive. But even if it takes some time, when being on a budget, it's very easy to make. Let me know in the comments if you would like to see the whole process in another video. Anyway, we mix it with water until it looks like cottage cheese or milk that went wrong, whichever image you like best, and we are ready to put it. Once it was dry, I realized I didn't want the road to continue uphill, but rather through it. So easy, we just need to cut the paper we put as filler because the compound over it is pretty solid already. What's next?
Plaster.
In one of my recent videos, my shadow clone did a small tutorial on how to easily do these rocks. So I'll be brief, but if you're interested, go check that link. In a nutshell, wrinkle some aluminum foil, take some plaster and mix it with water, and we have rocks. As soon as it dries, of course. 1 second. Now we have rocks in plural. And it's just about adding them to the diorama with the help of some modeling compound, because once it dries, it will hold all the rocks together. And also, because remember, it works as our filler. Smooth and shape the surfaces as you go, and make sure it's dry before you move to the next step.
Clay.
Well, more precisely, air dry clay. You wanna make a cobblestone road, or to simulate a wall of bricks, or perhaps you wanna create a very specific shape? Well, the easiest way to do it is often clay, because how forgiving it is. Whatever you don't like, you can start over. You can use other types of clay, like polymer, but for this kind of work, air dry works perfectly fine, because even if it starts to harden, you can bring it back just by getting it moist with some water.
Cork.
Maybe it's not easy for you to go to the countryside or somewhere you can find small rocks. That's not a problem. With some wine cork cut in small pieces, you can easily replicate them. Just don't make too many clean cuts and it will look 100% real.
Popsicles.
Did you think I forget? Come on, you know I wouldn't. We started this thing together, remember? Of course, here it is. And if you're into this channel, like Popsy, don't forget to subscribe. It will help us make Popsy more famous. So in this diorama, it's quite obvious why we want to use popsicles, since we're making a wooden fence and a couple of watch-out posts. But this is actually a very handy material. You can use super glue, hot glue or white glue to put it together. You have popsicles in various different shapes. It's easily cut and carved. It's really inexpensive, and more important, in my opinion, it's very resilient. The fence was easy, but the watch-out posts were a bit more demanding, let's say. I only have white glue, so there was a lot of thinking about which position was best for gluing, and for sure a lot of patience. You really don't want to use PVA glue for this. Super glue and hot glue are much better choices, but well, white glue it is this time. Before we move on, let me give you another advice. Unless you're a pro, you will find that sometimes you don't have the specific best tool for doing something. Of course, if you like this hobby, it makes a lot of sense to invest in certain things. Let me know in the comments, please, if you would like a video on this topic. However, don't let the lack of materials or tools be in your way. In this video, I cannot use a proper tool to cut the popsicles, and it would be very complicated to cut them with an utility knife. Solution? To crack them with my hands while I make sure the narrative of the diorama fits with the looks. And instead of a perfect fence, I decided to go for one that would make an orc or a barbarian feel like home. This is our freedom when creating, and it can be turned into the best tool that we can have when making a diorama. Okay, so after covering all the surface with modeling compound, because it will be a much easier surface to work on than just foam, we need to prime our diorama so we can paint it. And yes, we only have 2 colors. Well, we actually have 2 non-colors, as we only have black and white, so let's see how we manage. In previous dioramas, you saw me priming with black or white gesso, because it's cheap and it's great for this. But because we don't have it this time, I'm mixing the paint with PVA glue and a bit of water. And I'm using a ridiculously small brush. Don't do that. Once it's dry, I'm gonna paint the areas that would get the sun the most. First bluntly with a light gray, and then dry brush with an off-white. And also the popsicles. It's a pity we cannot use oils, because as you saw me in previous videos, they are great for this. But no worries. I guess the wooden fence could be white, or black, or grey, or not painted, just the popsicles. Why not? But to me, none of those options made sense, so I'll use a natural dye to bring them alive. Coffee. Depending on how thick you want this brown wash, let the coffee evaporate a bit. And here it is, our fake burnt sienna wash, ready to be applied.
Sand.
I grabbed this sand very near my house, and unfortunately it's not very thin. What can we do? Well, glad you asked. Just mix it with some gesso. Just a bit will improve its looks. But wait, what if I cannot just go into the wild? Well, certain materials are actually easy to find in any city, if you look in unusual places. Like for example sand, it can be found in a pet store, in big amounts. Now that it's dry, we're gonna apply some white glue diluted in water in some places, because we don't want to fully cover the rocks, and then we will apply the sand. Before we move on to our last step, let's have a moment to remember all those great materials that were brought in this diorama but didn't make the cut for an individual chapter.
Chipboard. Non-color colors. Toilet paper. PVA glue. Aluminium foil. Water. Snacks.
Thank you guys, I wouldn't have done it without you.
Rope.
And finally, another great material for realistic purposes that, cut in a small size, will make a great tuft. We just need some PVA glue and it's ready to be placed next to our wooden fence or where the paved road is cracked. And that's it. 10 plus materials for making a diorama under 10 euros. It can go bigger, it can have more features, and you can definitely spend more time and resources for bringing it alive than I did. But after this video, I hope that at least some of you will make up your mind and give it a try. Thanks a lot for watching, and remember, it wasn't just paper, it was also a hill.